Carla Innes, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today. Carla is one of our amazing accreditation panel members. We have the panel to ensure that every accreditation we do is impartial, fair, and reviewed, and that we are held to account. So all the panel are volunteers, and the common thread between them is they are really passionate about diversity and inclusion, and helping companies improve. So, Carla, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So Black History Month 2025, in your opinion, is it important that workplaces are celebrating and acknowledging Black History Month?
I think I've always got mixed feelings, probably like a lot of people, about Black History Month because it's a month, and I completely understand how it's come about and why it's here and why we should do it. Some organisations now will be doing this all year through, and obviously, if you're thinking about how you want to pioneer and be the best at what you want to do and achieve the results you want from Black History Month, that's absolutely the way to do it. But I suppose I have a bit of mixed emotions. I really like the opportunity to be able to amplify Black history during October in the UK, but I also feel a bit downhearted that we even need it, and I feel a bit downhearted that organisations use it as an opportunity to showcase things which they could be doing for the whole year, particularly in terms of like anti-racism, race equity in their workplaces. So I think it's super important for people to do it so that we have that reflection. I'd like to see that reflection all year, not limited to just 1 year. I'd like to see the activism all through the year. I'd like to see organisations with action plans. I'd like to see decent work being done. And I'd also like to, I suppose, steer away from the storytelling element of it as well. So again, Black History Month can often be cloaked in a lot of storytelling. And it's another thing that I feel quite torn about. There's very empowering examples of people that have shared their stories over the years, but there's also a lot of people needing to sort of seek out whether or not there's any truth to the sort of adversity that people have experienced and trying to hunt that down themselves, and it being a bit of a tearjerker, saviourist movement sometimes in Black History Month. So they're absolute powerhouses, they're absolute erasure of history. There's lots of reasons why we should mark, and that's even, you know, I'd probably use the word mark or commemorate rather than celebrate, I think. But more than anything, it's about inspiring some action within us in our organisations, and I think that's why I'm still sticking with it for now, Black History.
Well, I'm glad you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be here. So.
Otherwise I wouldn't be here. And yeah, and it's a busy month, you know, for Black people in the workplace, or Black people in fields of equality as well. It's a very busy month, a lot of things to do. So there's also the sort of tail end of that exhaustion and energy that it takes from people, but also the absolute opportunity when people pay and deliver on their promises to, you know, have speakers and other people to invest in the Black economy. So lots of good, a mixed bag of you for Black History Month for me. So
yeah, no, that's completely understandable. I think for me, I think when you have a day or a week or a month of awareness or celebration, a lot of the time they can be really cliched, and it is performative, and you have a post that is trotted out that is pretty much a cut and paste, and you don't believe there's much content behind it or much action behind it. And I think Black history at the moment, particularly Black British history, in the political times we are living in, I think actually the importance is even greater, because it's not in our curriculum, it's not what we're being taught at school, and the narrative and the headlines are very much about people who don't belong here. But actually, in uncovering proper Black history, you go, Well, actually, Black people have always been in Britain. There is this huge, amazing legacy and heritage that is part of what makes Britain Britain. Um, and I think that really needs to come to the fore at the moment to kind of counter some of those other narratives that are out there and we're experiencing. So thank you. So the series that we're running this month is very much about Black British heroes. So who have you chosen? Who's your hero?
Do you know? I couldn't limit myself to one. I think there's just so many, and again, thinking about figures, I'm always really cautious about people that this sort of notion of Black British pioneers being exceptional and us being saying, oh, this is the first person that's done this and the first person that's done that. All of those things are really important, but they erase how that even happened in the first place, what the systems that oppressed people. And even still now, we hear the first Black female mayor in Reading, for example. How in 2025 is that something that we're saying as though and I don't want to downplay people's exceptionality. People are exceptional who have managed to get through all of the barriers that are there, but it's a picture of exceptionality rather than discriminatory systems. So again, in terms of thinking about historical figures, I suppose I want to plant the notion that yes, people have been exceptional, but also these systems of oppression have been unacceptable for a long time and still are. And therefore, in spotlighting some of those people, I don't want to portray the narrative that I believe in. Sort of, you have to be exceptional to be able to mark it in history. One of the first figures that I wanted to spotlight was Dr. Cecil Clarke. I know you mentioned Harold Moody in one of your Dr. Harold Moody in one of your previous sessions. Dr. Cecil Clarke co-founded the League of Coloured People, and he's one of the people responsible for something we still use today, which is Clarke's rule in medicine for paediatrics and how we dose certain medicines for children. So an exceptional person, huge in the civil rights movement, and also openly lived with his partner, Edward Pat Walker. Very interesting for that period of time. Born in 1894, died in 1970. So Dr. Cecil Clarke. I couldn't, in my day job, you know, I work in the NHS in inclusion, and a big part of what we've been doing as part of our research is about the disproportionality of Black people who are detained under the Mental Health Act. Who pioneered this actually was Dr. Aggrey Burke, a huge powerhouse figure that looked at racial injustice in medicine, the access to, and also the impact of racism on mental health. So looking at all of those concepts even back then in the 80s, responding to the New Cross massacre as well. So Dr. Aggrey Burke, there's still a fellowship inspired by his name that people can apply to even to this very day. So Dr. Aggrey Burke. Dr. Aggrey Burke inspired Benjamin Zephaniah. Benjamin Zephaniah, huge poet of the people, died only 2 years ago. Poetic commentator on all things social justice, police brutality, racism, authored Too Black, Too Strong. There's probably not very many people that don't know about Benjamin Zephaniah's work, but a huge credit to Black British history and commentator on all things. And if anybody was listening to those names that I've mentioned, they've all been male. And I think that's another thing to kind of compound as we look back at Black British history, that many of the figures that are presented, even when we try to uncover those stories, tend to be men. So I'm going to spotlight, thinking back now, 50 years ago, the Bristol boycott, bus boycott, huge part of British history, actually. The reason why we have the Race Relations Act now is because of the Bristol boycott. And Roy Hackett and Paul Stevenson, huge figures in that movement for the civil rights in the UK at the time. A less known figure is Ena Hackett, who was Roy Hackett's wife. who was actually the first, who was actually the person that came forward and said they'd got denied a job at that bus company all the way back then. So she was actually the catalyst for that movement, which is not mentioned. You can't even find, if you scroll on the internet, you can't find the year that she was born. You can't find the date that she died. I think that's a really interesting point. I'm not, by the way, overlooking Roy Hackett and Paul Stevenson, who were magnificent, huge, brilliant figures of our times in terms of helping to inspire the Race Relations Act 50 years ago. But I suppose I just want a special mention there to Una Hackett. Una Mason, first black female broadcaster on TV in the 1930s in the wartime, connecting Caribbean soldiers with their families, another huge figure there. And Adeline Hall, the first, the biggest, highest paid female of the time, again in wartime Britain. Actually, she came from America, but she lived in Britain so long, I think I can call her British history, inspiring jazz music and black music in general in the UK. But yes, managing to be the highest paid female black entertainer of the time, which is in wartime Britain a huge achievement. And I suppose taking it even more locally to my own history, you know, my grandmother was part of the Windrush generation. She was a nurse. Olga Innes. She's probably, if I'm talking about heroes, she's probably my local hero. She's the person that inspired me today, and of course I wouldn't be here doing what I do without her. So a very long list of people there, because I was a bit greedy. I couldn't think of just one person, and actually when I started looking back through all of them and how actually a lot of their stories are connected when we think about British culture, not necessarily black culture, but British culture in general. I couldn't really leave any of those off the list. And actually, there's an even longer list, Liz, that I had. But I really appreciate that we didn't need to be here all day. And people have Google, and Google is free, and they can go look up many of these names and more. So, yeah.
I love this, Carla. Thank you so much, because yeah, we could have done a whole series with just you. But this is I think for me, yeah, people can Google loads of stuff, but do they? And actually talking about them and why they're important to you, it brings them to life, and it brings up names that perhaps we haven't heard. And it's interesting, I think, in the work that we do, we probably know a fair amount in this area. And so we assume that everybody else does, but it's really interesting how many of these names, if you mention to Joe Public on the street, they'd just go, no, never heard of them. So I mean, for me today, and interesting you say about women as well. So in the last session, we picked two women, so we were spotlighting the ladies, but mine today is male, and again intentionally was pre-war, because I think with the current narrative it's all very much about recent migration. So John Archer was born in Liverpool in 1863. He died in 1932, and he was a British political activist and politician, and he was elected mayor of Battersea in 1913, and at the time the mayorship also had political responsibilities as well. So he was the political leader of Battersea Council. In 1919 he was re-elected, and at that time he'd moved to become a Labour representative, but was re-elected. He was also president of the African Progress Union and British delegate for the Pan-African Congress in Paris, and then he later chaired the same Congress here in the UK. He was really active throughout his life in British politics. When he died in 1932, he was deputy leader of Battersea Council. And so for me, it's that we weren't taught this history in school. We weren't taught that Black people were an active part of British society. And I think that little nugget just actually helps reduce this narrative that we're seeing currently about they're all coming over and taking over. No, they've been contributing to Britain and to our society for generations and generations and generations. This isn't a recent thing. So that's why I chose John Archer today, because I think he was quite cool.
And how did you find out about John Archer?
That came from a conversation. I remember first hearing about him about 5 or 6 years ago in a conversation. And again, I was like, I haven't heard this name before. Google is your best friend. And you suddenly go, wow, and you find out about these amazing figures that were just part of, British political history. And actually, if you look at the fuss that was made about Rishi Sunak and Kevin Badenoch and Braverman and all those names about being in significant political positions as people of colour, you'd think it only happened in the last 10 years. And actually, no.
Yeah, it's true. I think people do forget that migration happened before the enslavement of Black people. Migration has been happening, and obviously the human race originated from Africa. So even that part people find quite astounding. But yeah, people do forget that migration was a huge part of society before war, before the transatlantic slave industry, if we could even call it an industry. But before that trafficking happened, yeah, migration was a huge part of things. And before racism was constructed, it wasn't necessarily even significant what the colour of anybody's skin was, because people held different positions in societies, as residents, as leaders, as everybody else. And it wasn't until, I suppose, the racial constructs during that trafficking period that race became a little bit more of a significant factor in how people determined who was more superior or inferior, and what the value of some of those things are. And when we're talking about curriculum, how things are depicted, and the sort of images that we soak up often in terms of Black British history, yeah, it's very tainted, very biased.
Again, Queen Charlotte, obviously famously portrayed in Bridgerton, but for years and years and years, I had no idea that she was Black. And when you look at royal portraits, she's painted whiter and whiter and whiter and whiter, and she was a Black woman, and you go, royal family, and actually she had an incredible amount of children, and most of them married into all the European families, so actually royal families. So you go, it's there, it's always been there, it's part of the population, the monarchy, the whatever else. And I think that is something that people could do with remembering and being reminded of.
Yeah, there's maybe some sinister reasons behind why things get depicted the way that they get depicted, and the way people are misled. But yeah, the information is out there. It's freely available if you look for it. I suppose, as we said at the start of this, it's a good opportunity in this month to try and encourage people to do that, to find out good information, to have a look at what their sources are, make sure what they're reading is credible, and yeah, be inspired by some of those things that have happened, and understand the diversity that we've got in the UK, where it all came from, why it's the way that it is, and who's built Britain the way it is today. So yeah, a lot to be thankful for, a lot to be grateful for. Diversity has been the bedrock of making Britain what it is today, and yeah, I'm pleased lots and lots of people know and appreciate that, and take the time to have a look back at why that is in the history book.
Yeah, no, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, Carla. Really lovely to have you with us. It's been a great session, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.